The twin suns of Kepler 186 painted the sky in shades of amber and rose as Maya Rodriguez stood at the edge of the biodome, her small hand pressed against the transparent barrier that separated her from the alien world beyond. At 9 years old, she already understood more about terraforming than most adults back on Earth, having grown up watching her mother's work transform the hostile environment of Kepler Prime into humanity's first true interstellar colony. The morning light caught the crystalline structures that dotted the landscape outside the dome, making them sparkle like diamonds scattered across the rust-colored soil. Inside the massive environmental enclosure, Earth plants thrived in carefully maintained conditions, creating a green oasis that stood in stark contrast to the alien desert beyond. "Maya, time for breakfast." Her mother's voice echoed through their home's communication system. Dr. Elena Rodriguez was already in her lab coat, preparing for another day of work in the Xenobotany division. The smell of fresh coffee and synthesized eggs filled their living unit as Maya made her way to the kitchen. Her father, Commander David Rodriguez, looked up from his security feeds with a warm smile. As head of colony security, he started each day reviewing overnight reports, though there was rarely anything more exciting than equipment malfunctions or minor disputes between colonists to deal with. "The new atmospheric processors are running at 108% efficiency," he announced, pride evident in his voice. "Your mother's enhanced algae are doing better than anyone expected. At this rate, we might be able to start limited operations outside the dome within 5 years instead of 10. Maya spooned up her breakfast while listening to her parents discuss the colony's progress. Kepler Prime had been their home for just over 2 years now, part of humanity's first push beyond their solar system. The colony was small, just 500 people, but it represented humanity's greatest achievement, proof that they could not only reach the stars but thrive among them. Through the kitchen window, Maya could see other children making their way to the colony's school center, their paths weaving between hydroponic gardens and research facilities. She grabbed her tablet and study materials, eager to join them. "Don't forget your environment monitor," her mother called after her. Maya patted the small device clipped to her collar, a constant companion that tracked atmospheric conditions and would alert her if any of the dome's systems showed signs of stress. The school center was housed in one of the colony's oldest structures, its walls still bearing the marks of the landing craft that had brought it from Earth. Inside, Maya's classroom buzzed with excitement. Today was special. They would be learning about the colony's first successful outdoor plant growth experiments. "Did you see the new sprouts?" her best friend Zara whispered as they took their seats. "Real Earth plants growing in alien soil." The achievement had the entire colony celebrating. It was one thing to grow plants in carefully controlled hydroponic systems, but quite another to have them survive in Kepler Prime's native soil, even if it had been heavily modified. Their teacher, Mr. Patel, began the lesson by showing them images from Earth's long history of space exploration. "You are all part of something incredible," he told the class. "Something humans have dreamed about for centuries. You are the first generation of humans to grow up on another world." Maya raised her hand. "Mr. Patel, when will we be able to go outside the dome without suits?" It was a question every child in the colony asked regularly. Though they understood the importance of the environmental controls, they all dreamed of running freely under the alien sky. "Sooner than we originally thought," he answered with a smile. "Thanks to the work of scientists like Maya's mother, we're making incredible progress. Now, who can tell me about the process of atmospheric transformation?" The morning passed quickly as they learned about the complex science that made their home possible. During their midday break, Maya and her friends gathered at their favorite spot, a small garden that provided a clear view of both the colony's central hub and the alien landscape beyond the dome. They shared their lunches and dreams of exploration, pointing out formations in the distance they hoped to visit someday. None of them noticed the slight distortion in the upper atmosphere, a ripple in space that might have indicated something massive emerging from faster-than-light travel. None of them knew that high above their peaceful colony, the Vexthal Empire's advanced scout ships were taking up position, their sensors analyzing the human settlement below. The Vexthal, ancient and proud, had watched humanity's expansion with growing concern. They had ruled this sector of space for millennia, tolerating other species only when they remained properly submissive. Humans, with their rapid technological advancement and unflagging determination to spread among the stars, represented something the Vexthal had not encountered before, a species that might one day challenge their dominion. As Maya and her friends returned to their afternoon classes, the Vexthal High Command was already reaching its decision. This colony, this foothold of humanity beyond their solar system, could not be allowed to succeed. They saw the humans as upstart primitives who needed to be taught their place in the galaxy's hierarchy. They didn't understand that their decision to destroy this peaceful settlement would change everything. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the dome as Maya worked on her science project. A detailed analysis of how Earth plants were adapting to longer day cycles on Kepler Prime. Her mother had helped her set up small growing stations in their home unit, and Maya carefully documented each plant's progress every day. "Look at this, Dad," she called out excitedly as her father returned from his security rounds. "The modified wheat is growing 20% faster than on Earth." Commander Rodriguez examined her careful notes with appropriate seriousness, though his eyes twinkled with amusement at his daughter's enthusiasm. "You're going to be an even better scientist than your mother," he said, ruffling her hair. Maya beamed at the compliment, not knowing these were among the last peaceful moments their family would share. Above them, the Vexthal ships moved into attack position, their weapons powered up and targeting systems locked on the colony's vital infrastructure. The last light of day painted the dome in brilliant colors as Maya prepared for bed, her mind full of dreams about the future. She imagined herself exploring beyond the dome, discovering new alien plants, helping to make this world truly their home. She didn't know that in less than 12 hours, everything would change. She didn't know that her name would become a battle cry, that her fate would unite humanity in a way nothing else ever had. As night fell over Kepler Prime, Maya Rodriguez slept peacefully, unaware that she was about to become the spark that would set the galaxy on fire. The attack began at dawn. Maya was helping in the colony's nursery when the first shots hit. She had started volunteering there 3 months ago, reading stories to the younger children before school started. The nursery was her favorite place in the colony, a room filled with hope and new beginnings, where the first generation of humans born on an alien world were taking their first steps. The initial blast struck the dome's primary power generator. The lights flickered, and for a moment, everything seemed to pause. 3-year-old Emma, who had been sitting in Maya's lap listening to a story about Earth's elephants, looked up with confused eyes. Why did the lights go funny? Before Maya could answer, the colony's alert system activated, its harsh wail cutting through the morning quiet. Through the nursery's panoramic windows, designed to let the children watch the stars at night, Maya saw them. Massive ships descending through the amber sky, their dark hulls seeming to absorb the light of Kepler Prime's twin suns. Emergency protocols initiated, the colony's AI announced, its usually calm voice carrying an edge of urgency. All citizens proceed to designated shelter areas. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. The nursery erupted into chaos. The youngest children began crying, startled by the noise and the fear they could sense in the adults around them. Miss Jensen, the head caretaker, immediately began organizing evacuation procedures, her years of drill practice kicking in. Maya, help me with the infants. Everyone else, buddy system, just like we practiced. Maya rushed to the cribs where the colony's youngest members lay. She had just picked up 6-month-old Marcus when the second blast hit. This one was closer, and the impact made the entire structure shudder. Through the windows, she could see the dome's atmospheric shield flickering, its protective barrier struggling against weapons it was never designed to withstand. Commander Rodriguez's voice came over the emergency channel, steady despite the crisis. "This is a code black evacuation. All civilians proceed to underground shelters immediately. Security teams to defensive positions. This is not a drill. Maya knew her father would be in the colony's command center, coordinating the response. She could hear the strain in his voice. They had prepared for natural disasters, equipment failures, even the occasional hostile local wildlife. But this, an attack from an advanced alien civilization. This was beyond anything they had imagined. The nursery's emergency exit led directly to one of the underground shelter access points. Maya helped Miss Jensen organize the evacuation, keeping the older children calm as they guided them down the reinforced corridor. The sounds of destruction from above grew louder, punctuated by the whine of failing systems and the deep, resonant hum of the alien weapons. They were halfway to the shelter when the dome's integrity was finally breached. The atmospheric alarms screamed a warning as Kepler Prime's toxic air began seeping in through damaged sections. Maya's environmental monitor flashed red, its display showing rapidly deteriorating conditions. "Masks on," Miss Jensen shouted, helping the children secure their emergency breathing apparatus. Maya made sure Marcus's infant protection pod was properly sealed before checking on the other babies. The children had drilled for this, but the reality was far more frightening than any practice session. Through the corridor's emergency lighting, Maya could see other colonists rushing toward the shelters. Scientists from the research labs, engineers from the atmospheric processors, farmers from the hydroponic gardens, all running for their lives as their carefully built world crumbled around them. A massive explosion rocked the colony, closer than any before. The ceiling above them creaked ominously, and Maya could see cracks forming in the reinforced concrete. Without thinking, she pushed little Emma forward, just as a section of the corridor began to collapse. "Run!" Maya screamed, helping the children ahead of her. She could hear Miss Jensen at the front of the group, urging them toward the shelter entrance just visible around the next bend. Maya turned back to make sure no one had fallen behind, and saw him, 4-year-old Daniel, frozen in fear, staring at the collapsing ceiling. Maya didn't hesitate. She ran back, scooping Daniel up in her arms. The boy clung to her as she raced toward the shelter, the sound of falling debris getting closer. They were almost there when Maya heard the terrible groaning of failing structural supports above them. Miss Jensen appeared in the shelter doorway, her face pale with fear. "Maya, hurry." Maya looked at the distance remaining, then at the children already safe in the shelter. She could feel the corridor becoming unstable, could hear the cracking of support beams stressed beyond their limits. In that moment, Maya Rodriguez, 9 years old and far braver than anyone could have expected, made her decision. With all her strength, she threw Daniel forward. Miss Jensen caught him, pulling the boy to safety. Maya turned to run, but it was too late. The ceiling came down in a cascade of debris and dust. The last thing she saw was Miss Jensen's horrified face as the shelter's emergency doors slammed shut, protecting those inside from the collapse. In orbit, Supreme Commander Zextal of the Vexthal Empire watched the destruction with cold satisfaction. The human colony was being systematically demolished, its defenses proving useless against superior Vexthal technology. He noted with approval how his gunners targeted key infrastructure, power systems, atmospheric processors, communication arrays. Soon, nothing would remain of this human attempt to spread beyond their bounds. A junior officer approached, mandibles clicking in the Vexthal equivalent of a respectful salute. "Supreme Commander, we're detecting numerous automated distress beacons launching from the surface. Should we destroy them?" Zextal considered for a moment, then dismissed the concern with a wave of his upper appendage. "Let them transmit. Let their homeworld see what happens when primitives reach too far, too fast. This will serve as an effective warning to keep humanity contained in their own system." What Zextal didn't understand, what none of the Vexthal could comprehend, was exactly what those beacons would transmit. They didn't understand that their warning would carry something far more powerful than fear back to Earth. The beacons carried the colony's final moments, including security footage from the nursery corridor. They carried Maya's story. The images were clear, captured by emergency lighting and backup power. A 9-year-old girl choosing to save others instead of herself. A child standing against the darkness, showing courage that would break hearts and ignite fury across human space. The Vexthul, in their arrogance, had just provided humanity with something far more dangerous than any weapon, a martyr. As the dust settled over the ruins of Kepler Prime, the distress beacons raced toward Earth at faster than light speed. They carried with them not just a record of destruction, but a spark that would ignite something the Vexthul had never encountered before: the full, unrestrained fury of humanity united in grief and rage. In the colony's wreckage, Maya's environmental monitor continued broadcasting its final readings, its signal picked up by the beacons. Its data told a story of its own: how its young wearer had remained in a collapsing corridor, in a toxic atmosphere, to ensure others reached safety. The monitor's last readings showed elevated heart rate, increased respiratory effort, and determination that defied quantification. The Vexthul ships departed, their mission accomplished, leaving behind the ruins of humanity's first interstellar colony. They believed they had struck a decisive blow, one that would resonate through human space and remind the species of its proper place in the galaxy. They were right about one thing: this attack would resonate, but not in the way they imagined, not in the way they feared, in the way they would come to regret. Admiral Victoria Kane stood motionless in the United Earth Defense Command Center, her eyes fixed on the main display as the footage from Kepler Prime played for the 7th time. The room was silent except for the soft hum of computers and the occasional sharp intake of breath from the assembled military and civilian leaders. The distress beacons had arrived 6 hours ago. Since then, the images had been broadcast across every network, every communications channel, every display device on and above Earth. The footage showed everything: the arrival of the alien ships, the systematic destruction of the colony, and most devastatingly, the final moments of a 9-year-old girl named Maya Rodriguez. "Play it again," Kane ordered, her voice steady but tight with controlled emotion. "Focus on the alien ship's attack pattern." As the footage restarted, Dr. James Harrison, head of Earth's Advanced Weapons Research Division, stepped forward. "Their technology is beyond anything we've encountered, but there's something interesting in their tactical approach." He gestured to the display. "Look at how they target our infrastructure. They're following a textbook strategic elimination pattern. Almost predictable." Kane nodded slowly. In her 30 years of military service, she had learned that predictability in an enemy was often more valuable than any technological advantage. "They're used to being dominant," she observed. "They don't expect resistance, don't anticipate adaptation." The doors to the command center slid open, admitting Dr. Elena Rodriguez. Maya's mother had been on Earth for a conference when the attack occurred, a twist of fate that had spared her life, but forced her to watch her family's destruction from afar. Her face was pale but composed, her grief channeled into purpose. "The analysis of their weapon signatures is complete," she announced, her professional demeanor masking the storm beneath. "Their energy weapons operate on principles we've theorized but never successfully implemented." But she paused, bringing up new data on a secondary display. "Their fundamental approach to physics, to technology itself, is remarkably linear. They've been unchallenged for so long, they've stopped innovating." Around the room, other screens showed scenes from across the globe. The response to the attack had been unprecedented. Ancient enemies were reaching across borders, sharing resources and technology. China's quantum computing labs were collaborating with Silicon Valley's AI researchers. Russian aerospace engineers were working alongside NASA scientists. The European Union had opened its classified research facilities to experts from every nation. In orbit, the massive shipyards that had been building civilian vessels were being rapidly converted for military production. The destruction of Kepler Prime had awakened something in humanity, a unified purpose that transcended old rivalries and grievances. "Dr. Harrison," Kane turned to the weapons researcher, "tell me about Project Prometheus." Harrison's eyes widened slightly. That's purely theoretical. We haven't even begun practical trials. Theory becomes practice today, Kane interrupted. How long to have a working prototype? Under normal circumstances, years. But Harrison looked at the display, where Maya's final moments played in a silent loop. With unlimited resources and global cooperation, maybe 3 months. Kane nodded. You have too. Dr. Rodriguez, your work on xenobiology gives you unique insight into their physical structure. I want you working with the weapons division. Find their weaknesses. Elena Rodriguez stared at the image of her daughter frozen on the screen. They have weaknesses, she said softly. They just don't know it yet. In laboratories and research facilities across the globe, humanity's greatest minds were already at work. Projects that had been purely theoretical were fast-tracked into development. The quantum tunneling technology that had stumped scientists for decades suddenly had unlimited funding and resources. Dark matter reactors moved from experimental to operational status in weeks instead of years. The Vexthol's attack had revealed something crucial about their civilization. They had evolved along predictable lines, developing technology in a linear fashion. But humans, isolated on their single world, had been forced to think differently. While the Vexthol perfected energy weapons, humanity had explored countless alternative approaches to physics and engineering. In a secured facility beneath the Rocky Mountains, Dr. Harrison's team achieved their first breakthrough. The Prometheus project, originally conceived as a theoretical exercise in physics, produced its first successful test. The technology would allow human ships to phase slightly out of normal spacetime, making conventional energy weapons pass harmlessly through them. It's not perfect, Harrison explained to Admiral Kane as they watched the test footage. We can't maintain the phase state for long, and it requires enormous power. But it's something they've never seen before, Kane finished. Something they won't know how to counter. What else? The answers came from every corner of the globe. Indian scientists had perfected a new form of quantum-entangled communication that couldn't be intercepted or jammed. Brazilian engineers had developed adaptive armor that could learn from and respond to enemy weapons. African research teams had created artificial intelligence systems that could predict and counter alien tactics in real time. In orbit, the first of the new warships took shape. They looked nothing like conventional vessels, their design driven purely by function rather than form. Each ship incorporated technology that would have been considered impossible just months ago, all of it focused on one purpose: defeating an enemy that thought itself invincible. Kane stood in the observation deck of the orbital shipyard, watching as construction drones swarmed around the nearly completed first wave of vessels. Behind her, Elena Rodriguez worked at a console, finalizing the integration of her biological research into the ship's targeting systems. We're calling the first ship Maya's Memory, Kane said softly. With your permission, of course. Elena's hand stilled on the console. She would have been amazed by all this, she said after a moment. She always believed humanity's greatest strength was our ability to work together, to learn from each other. Even at 9, she understood that. She taught us all something, Kane replied. The Vexthol thought they were teaching us a lesson about our place in the galaxy. Instead, my daughter taught them about humanity, Elena finished. Her voice was steady, but her eyes burned with a cold fire. And the lesson isn't over yet. In high orbit, the first fleet of Earth's new warships prepared for their shakedown trials. Their hulls incorporated technology from a dozen nations. Their weapons represented the combined innovation of humanity's greatest minds, and their crews carried with them the unshakable purpose of a species united in grief and rage. The Vexthol had ruled through fear for millennia, assuming their technological superiority made them invincible. They didn't understand that they had just created something unprecedented, a humanity that moved with single purpose, driven by a combination of grief, rage, and an unshakable determination to show the galaxy that killing a human child was the worst mistake any species could make. As the fleet prepared for its first mission, Admiral Kane received word that the Prometheus project had achieved full combat readiness 2 weeks ahead of even their accelerated schedule. Humanity was ready. "Send word to all ships," she ordered, her voice carrying across all command channels. "Operation Remembrance begins in 12 hours. Maya Rodriguez was 9 years old. She died saving others. Remember her name. Remember what they did. And remember what we're going to do about it." The fleet's engines began to power up, their dark matter cores humming with barely contained energy. The Vexthul were about to learn that their greatest mistake wasn't attacking the human colony. Their greatest mistake was giving humanity a reason to show the galaxy what they were truly capable of when united by a cause. The Vexthul border station, Eternal Vigilance, hung in space like an obsidian star, its weapon arrays dormant, and its sensors focused on the established trade routes. Station Commander Kexri reviewed routine patrol reports, mandibles clicking in boredom. The destruction of the human colony had been 3 months ago, and the expected diplomatic protests from Earth had been disappointingly mild. Another quiet shift, he commented to his second-in-command. "Perhaps the humans are more sensible than we." The station's sensors exploded with warnings. Reality itself seemed to tear open as human ships stepped through holes in space-time that Vexthul instruments couldn't even properly detect. The vessels emerged in perfect attack formation, their designs unlike anything the Empire had encountered in its millennia of dominance. Admiral Victoria Kane stood on the bridge of the Maya's memory, watching the tactical display as her fleet surrounded the station. "All ships, execute Battle Plan Prometheus," she ordered calmly. "Remember your training. Remember why we're here." The human fleet attacked with technologies that defied Vexthul understanding. Instead of energy weapons, they fired projectiles accelerated to near-light speed by gravity manipulation fields. The station's shields, designed to deflect plasma and laser fire, might as well have been spider webs trying to stop bullets. "Impossible," Kexri shouted as the first relativistic rounds punched clean through his station's outer defenses. Their technology was primitive. They'd barely had interstellar travel. The station's automated distress calls brought the nearest Vexthul battle group emerging from hyperspace, their massive warships dropping into normal space with weapons already charged. They found themselves facing an enemy that refused to fight according to any rules they understood. On the bridge of the Maya's memory, Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched the tactical display with cold satisfaction. Multiple Vexthul capital ships detected, the ship's AI reported. Their energy signatures matched those from the Kepler Prime attack. "Deploy the Fireflies," Kane ordered. From the human ships poured thousands of small autonomous drones, each carrying a miniaturized dark matter reactor. Together, they created a web of gravitational distortions that threw the precise Vexthul formation into chaos. The Imperial ships, trying to maintain their traditional battle patterns, found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to exist in multiple phases of reality simultaneously. The human vessels phased in and out of normal space, becoming ghost-like when enemy fire approached, then solidifying to launch their own attacks. The Vexthul commanders tried to adapt, but their tactical doctrine was too rigid, too set in its ways after millennia of unchallenged supremacy. "Their shields are adapting to our initial attack pattern," reported Lieutenant Commander James Chen from the weapons station. "Just as we predicted." "Exactly as we predicted," Kane smiled grimly. "Execute Phase 2. The human fleet's formation shifted, implementing battle plans created by AIs that had spent months analyzing every frame of footage from the Kepler Prime attack. The Vexthul's predictability became their greatest weakness as humanity's weapons and tactics changed faster than their ancient enemies could comprehend. In the heart of the Maya's memory, Elena Rodriguez monitored the effectiveness of her biological warfare systems. She had spent months studying the Vexthul genetic structure, identifying vulnerabilities their arrogance had left unprotected. Now, specialized nanites seeded through their ship's ventilation systems began their work, not to kill, but to incapacitate, to ensure the Vexthul survived to witness what was coming. "Station's primary reactor is critical," Chen reported. Their backup systems are failing exactly as our models predicted. Kane opened a channel to the crippled Vexthal vessels. "This message is for your empire," she said, her voice level but filled with steel. "The child you murdered on Kepler Prime was named Maya Rodriguez. She was 9 years old. She died saving others from your cowardly attack on civilians. Remember that name. Remember what happened here. Because this is just the beginning." The station's reactor finally breached, turning the once mighty fortress into an expanding cloud of debris. The surviving Vexthal ships, their crews partially paralyzed by Elena's nanites, could only watch as the human fleet prepared to depart. "You're leaving survivors," Elena observed, standing beside Kane on the bridge. "Of course," Kane replied. "They need to carry our message back to their empire. They need to explain how a primitive species just destroyed one of their most fortified positions with ease." She paused, studying the tactical display. "And they need to understand that we could have killed them all, but chose not to. That will frighten them more than anything else." The human fleet vanished back through their quantum tunnels, leaving behind a scene that would send shockwaves through the Empire. When Vexthal rescue ships finally arrived, they found the survivors in a state of shock, babbling about vessels that turned into ghosts and weapons that ignored the laws of physics as they understood them. In the Empire's Grand War Room, Supreme Commander Zextal received the reports with growing horror. The humans weren't just fighting back. They were winning, and doing so in ways that violated everything the Vexthal thought they knew about warfare and technology. "How?" he demanded of his senior scientists. "How did they advance so quickly? How did they develop technologies we never even conceived of?" The answer came from an unexpected source, a junior xenologist who had been studying Earth's historical records. "They did it because of how we attacked," she said quietly. "Humans have a unique characteristic we didn't account for. When faced with overwhelming tragedy, they don't cower. They don't submit. They unite. We didn't break their spirit. We forged it into something stronger." On the bridge of the Maya's memory, Admiral Kane reviewed the battle data as her fleet prepared for their next strike. The Vexthal were already mobilizing their forces, but they were doing so according to strategies and doctrines that were millennia old. They were preparing to fight the last war, while humanity was inventing new ways of combat with every passing day. "Send word to Earth," she ordered. "Operation Remembrance Phase 1 is complete. All objectives achieved. No human casualties." She paused, looking at the image of Maya Rodriguez that had been mounted on the bridge's main viewport. "And tell them we're just getting started." The fleet disappeared into quantum space, leaving behind a shattered station, crippled enemy vessels, and the beginning of a legend that would echo through the galaxy for generations to come. The Vexthal had ruled through fear for thousands of years. Now they were learning what it meant to be afraid. 6 months after the destruction of the border station, the Vexthal Empire was in chaos. The species that had dominated the galaxy for thousands of years found itself fighting an enemy that seemed to defy the very laws of nature as they understood them. Supreme Commander Zextal stood before the Imperial High Council, his once pristine ceremonial armor now scratched and battle-worn. The Grand Chamber, with its towering crystalline spires and ancient victory banners, felt more like a tomb than a seat of power. "Another sector lost," he reported, his voice heavy. "The humans, they're not following any known patterns of warfare. Their ships appear from nowhere, strike with impossible weapons, and vanish before we can mount an effective defense. They're attacking targets we thought were secret, using weaknesses we didn't know existed." On the massive display behind him, red indicators showed the extent of human advances into Vexthal space. Each point represented another defeat, another demonstration of humanity's terrifying capacity for innovation and adaptation. "How?" demanded High Counselor Vexnan, her ceremonial crown glinting in the chamber's dim light. "How did they advance so quickly? Their technology was centuries behind ours." Dr. Kexley, the Empire's leading xenologist, stepped forward. She had spent the last 6 months studying everything they could learn about humanity, trying to understand their unprecedented rise. "We fundamentally misunderstood them," she explained. "We saw their isolation on a single world as a weakness. We saw their internal conflicts as a sign of primitiveness. We were wrong." She brought up new images on the display, scenes from Earth showing the global cooperation that had followed the Kepler Prime attack. "Humans evolved in isolation, yes," she continued. "But this meant they had to solve problems independently, developing technologies and approaches we never considered because we had always done things differently. Their internal conflicts drove innovation, forced them to think creatively. And when we attacked their colony," she paused, bringing up the image that had become infamous throughout the empire, Maya Rodriguez's final moments. "When we killed their children, we gave them something far more powerful than any weapon: absolute unity of purpose." In orbit above the Vexthul homeworld, Admiral Victoria Kane watched through quantum-shifted sensors as her fleet moved into position. The Maya's memory, now bearing the scars of dozens of victories, led the formation. Beside her stood Elena Rodriguez, her face set in the same expression of quiet determination she had worn since the day she watched her daughter's last moments. "Their final defensive line is exactly where we predicted," Elena noted, studying the tactical display. "Still following the same strategies they've used for millennia." Kane nodded. "They don't know how to adapt. They've been dominant for so long, they've forgotten how to change." She opened a channel to the fleet. "All ships, prepare for Operation Maya's Justice." In the council chamber, alarms began to sound. "Impossible," Zextal shouted, staring at the tactical displays. "They've penetrated our homeworld's defenses. Our best shields, our strongest weapons, mean nothing," Dr. Kexley finished quietly. "Because they're not fighting the way we expect them to fight. They're not even fighting the way they fought last week. They're constantly evolving, constantly innovating. Every time we develop a counter to their tactics, they've already moved on to something new." The human fleet appeared in normal space, their ship's phase shifting in perfect synchronization. The Vexthul defensive fleet, the mightiest armada ever assembled in the Empire's history, found itself facing an enemy that had studied and countered every aspect of their military doctrine. "This is Admiral Victoria Kane of the United Earth Defense Force," her voice broadcasted across all frequencies. "Your empire launched an unprovoked attack on a peaceful colony. You murdered innocent civilians. You killed children. You did this to teach humanity a lesson about our place in the galaxy." She paused, letting the words sink in. "Lesson learned. Now it's our turn to teach." The battle that followed would be studied by military historians for centuries to come. The human fleet didn't just defeat the Vexthul defenses, they dismantled them, using technologies and tactics that made their previous encounters seem primitive by comparison. Ships controlled by adaptive AI systems predicted and countered Vexthul strategies before they were even implemented. Quantum-phased weapons bypassed defenses the Empire had thought impenetrable. In the council chamber, Zextal watched as centuries of assumed superiority crumbled in hours. "We surrender," he finally transmitted, his proud voice breaking. "We will submit to any terms." "No," came Kane's immediate response. "Surrender isn't enough. You're going to learn what it means to coexist. You're going to learn what humanity has always known. That true strength comes not from dominance, but from cooperation. Not from fear, but from understanding." The terms that followed were unprecedented in galactic history. The Vexthul Empire would be dismantled, its territories reorganized into a cooperative alliance of species. But more importantly, they would be required to learn, to change, to grow beyond their ancient assumptions of superiority. 1 year to the day after the attack on Kepler Prime, a new colony rose from the ruins of the old. But this time, it wasn't just humans working to build it. Under the supervision of Earth scientists, Vexthul engineers learned new ways of thinking, new approaches to problems they had thought solved ages ago. Other species, long suppressed by imperial doctrine, brought their own unique perspectives and technologies. Admiral Kane and Elena Rodriguez stood on a hill overlooking the new colony, watching as humans and aliens worked together to build something unprecedented, a true interstellar community. Maya would have loved this, Elena said softly, watching a group of Vexthal children playing with human kids in the colony's new park. This is what she always said we could be, better together than apart. Kane nodded, looking up at the statue that stood at the colony center, a bronze figure of a 9-year-old girl, forever frozen in an act of sacrifice that had changed the galaxy. The inscription at its base read simply, Maya Rodriguez. She taught us all how to be human. The Vexthal had sought to teach humanity its place in the galaxy. Instead, they had learned the most important lesson of all, that true civilization isn't measured by the strength of its weapons or the reach of its empire, but by its capacity for growth, change, and compassion. And in the end, it took a child's courage to teach an ancient empire what it meant to be truly civilized.